I did, I was very, as I believe a lot of people immersed on a way of working as an athlete. I did work with, a very clear path of being developed, like a lot of athletes, a lot of rowers in the world. So Row Perfect crossed me pretty much as that I own one, and I didn't use it because it was uncomfortable and it was new and it was I didn't know about it. So one day, I was rowing my single and I had this machine at home that I bought, but I didn't use because it was uncomfortable and it was too hard on me. I decided to start using it, challenged by the investment I have made. And what I did is start rigging it. So making adjustments on the machine, the old machine I got, the old model that Cast Records made. I start making adjustments to make it feel like my single, and hooking it to the computer and start comparing what I was feeling on the stationary machine to the Row Perfect to my single. So it was the good thing was that I didn't have any person to guide me, or I didn't follow anybody. It was totally like try error and really what I was feeling on the water, which gave to a very strong path of creativity or of unknown. I didn't have anything that will make me anticipate something because I didn't know. So that was very powerful on, I think, the path that I got in, or the direction I got into it, because it was really coming out of what I was feeling, not what people were telling me.
That's really interesting, Carlos, and I've never heard that story before. So you went on a voyage of discovery. Tell us, what were the things that you found once you had set yourself this challenge to use this awkward piece of machinery that was too hard for you to use? What did it make you learn?
So the first thing I felt the first day I sat on it was that it didn't feel like my single because I wasn't comfortable on it. So I felt that it was too heavy. So I decided that I could make a bigger disc. So I took cardboard and I make a bigger disc and made it lighter to feel. At this moment, it wasn't hooked to the computer. So I made it, I just was looking for feel. I was rowing at that time every day on the water. I was doing the same workout. I was from 16 to 20 kilometers steady state. I wasn't training for any race. So I knew exactly how my single felt. And I was been an international rower in the past, so I did know how to row, pretty proficiency. So I make it lighter, and I remember that I put some foot stretchers where my feet could be hooked better, because it had these laces that my feet wasn't really like subject well, and I did raise my seat because I felt my feet in proportion to the height. So I pretty much measured what I had on my single, and I did measure, and I measured like the feet, the seat, and I made it lighter so that it got closer to the feel of the boat.
And after you had done that, something must have made you want to carry on using the Row Perfect. So what was it?
That's the key question you asked me there. So what was it was, at the time I was rowing in Seattle, close from where I used to live in Seattle. There is a lake that is very small, and I will do everything the same thing. I will make turns on that lake, and I will row nonstop. And every day I'll do the same thing for months. The interesting thing was that I knew exactly, and it was always the same single, the same rigging, a GPS, and what I felt. So it was very clear because every day I felt the same thing. So Seattle is in the northwest, so we get hit by storms, and when a storm hits, it can get really windy. So, it is the winter. I rigged the Row Perfect one day. I was curious, and then one of the storms hit, so I cannot get on the water to do my regular training, and I'm in a schedule. So what I do this day that I cannot get on the water, normally I'll sit on the stationary machine, is say, well, I'm going to give it a try. I rigged it, it feels good. So I did my training on the Row Perfect with no computer. So what was the light was that the next day when I went on the water, I felt different on the single. So I felt a difference. And it was obvious that that difference was that I did something different, because every day I was feeling the same. So I just, after 2-3 days rowing on the water, that feel went away, because, you know, I was doing the same. And then I said, well, next time it gets windy, I'm going to do the same thing to see if that difference I felt, that I didn't know exactly what it was, but it felt like, it felt good. It felt like I could have more fun on the single, and I didn't know why. I'm going to see if it makes that difference again. So next time it got windy, I did the same workout. I repeated exactly, and I went on the water the next day, and I felt the same thing I felt 1 or 2 weeks before. So then I knew that it was because of the machine, and rowing on the machine gave me something that I couldn't reach on the water, that made the boat feel different and better. And lately I discovered what that was, but at the moment I didn't know. I just knew that it was something that was going better.
Very, very interesting. So the computer came in later on, I guess.
Yes. Yes, the computer.
Tell us what you did when you...
Sorry?
Tell us what you did with the computer.
So at that time, I'm rowing the single. I'm really, having fun with rowing. I'm trying to help people. I want to coach. So I start a business to, coach people in Seattle, like master rowers, high schools. And then I decide to help them with the Row Perfect. And I need data. So before I start the business, I contact Row Perfect Justus, and I download the software and I start learning with it. So what I did with the Row Perfect at the beginning was pretty much look at what I was doing when I was rowing the machine and learn from the data. Obviously, a lot of things happen during this moment. One of the things that happened is that I start getting very curious online and finding a lot of data about people who had used the Row Perfect and information from the software. I did contact Justus, who made the software, to learn about the Row Perfect. I did contact you and got data from you that you had data and Grant had data. I did also start at this time coaching people and using it at the University of Washington. We start collecting a lot of data. And also at this moment is when I start coaching Ursula as a novice rower, one of the others I coach, and collect data. So and then also I become close with Cass Records, who kind of mentor me about the computer software and what this data means and all the information. So pretty much I learned about the computer by using it, by getting feedback from people, and by watching a lot of rowers from different levels and different backgrounds and different goals, rowing with the software.
And going back just to you yourself, when it was just you in the single on the lake and the Row Perfect with the software, do you now know what the change was that you felt so different in your boat that day after the storm?
Yeah, it was the timing at the catch. So what I felt was that when I was rowing the Row Perfect at home, I could really pay more attention to the speed of the wheel and picking up the wheel and accelerating. And I believe also I could feel more that when I didn't turn direction correctly at the end of the stroke by keeping, my weight on the stretcher and not losing the stretcher, I could lose a lot more out of control on the machine, which the boat wasn't that clear. So I do believe was the combination of both. I think was one, my timing at the catch was more accurate. I could pick up the boat and the water more efficiently just with one practice on the Row Perfect. I could feel it. Second is I could feel more when I was losing the stretcher or not on the change of direction with my blade work. When the blade gets out of the water, be sure that my body weight is on the stretcher and I'm not losing the stretcher. And the third thing I think I could feel also is like that I had proper acceleration and I didn't just collapse at the end of the stroke. Obviously, acceleration is a reaction, will make the reaction of having good change of direction at the end of the stroke, because to change direction correctly at the end of the stroke, you need to have connection to the blade on the water before the extraction. So I think was the combination of all those that I could feel just with one practice on the row perfect, and it was very clear. I would like to add that when I rowed the row perfect, I did row it really accurately, meaning I will pay a lot of attention to the feel of the machine, and I would try to really feel what I was finding on the boat and and I could enjoy a lot the floating, the feel and the rhythm and the dancing on the machine, which that's what kept me going every morning to row my single, that I had fun flowing on the water and I could achieve that on the machine too.
That's fascinating, Carlos. I love the concept of you dancing on the machine. Let's move on now, because most of the people who have joined this chat, I think, are rowing coaches. How can coaches use the row perfect to get an advantage?
So after, lots of practices on the row perfect myself, the people I coach, trying a lot of things at, college level with many rowers, athletes I coach myself, giving advice to other coaches and hearing from them feedback. I think to be clear and to be simple and to give clear direction, I will say that you can do anything you do on the water on the row perfect. So the fascinating thing about that machine is that if you coach well on the water, you will coach well on the rowing machine because the same principles apply. So it becomes not just a fitness machine. It becomes a lot more than a fitness machine. It becomes a tool to make people perfect on the land, to take advantage when they're on the water to be more perfect, by giving them a platform that you cannot achieve on the water, which is, one, is more simple because there is no balance, there is no direction, you are by yourself, and the more important of all, obviously it feels like the boat, so you can really try to feel what you want people to feel on the water. But the more important of all is the direct feedback of its software. So the rower is every stroke understanding what is happening with his blade work and how he's applying pressure into the blade to move the boat, and how he's moving his body on the recovery that will affect the drive and the timing and everything else. So to answer your question, I will say that you can work on posture and form 100%. You can mirrors and ask the athlete to look into the mirror how his form and posture looks like. You can stop the athlete and tell him, I don't want that. I want you to do that. Look at on the mirror. You are not doing what I'm asking you to do. You can ask him to do something and look at the direct feedback on the computer. You can tell him, I want you to achieve that. And to do that, I want you to change that. If there is not a direct change on the computer, he's not doing it. So you can tell him, stop and think about it. If there is no reaction to your action, there is no action. Very difficult to do that on the water because there is no direct feedback every stroke of something objective. Either the coach, the athlete cannot see himself with a mirror, or, very few people can afford the goggles to look at, their body, as we know that some elite teams do. The other thing you can do that I think is fascinating is there is a huge amount of athletes, of people who are rowing. I will say over 90% of people who row in the world, they don't know how to row a single, and they will never become single scholars. So these people, the only chance they have to feel what a rowing boat feels without being connected to other people is the row perfect, because they might not be in a system where they can afford going on a single, or they might not have the time. I found fascinating how we try to teach people to row before first teaching them to row by themselves. It is like learning to dance connected to another person before you learn to move yourself. It just it just makes no sense on the learning process, but rowing is what it is. A lot of programs don't have the ability to send their rowers in singles, and they learn in an eight or in a double or in a pair, and they never get the chance to row by themselves. So the row perfect lets you make a change you and not be subjected to somebody attached. It develops also the chance, because it feels like the boat and it moves like a boat, that you are getting the movements that you're achieving on a boat. So for example, if you increase the stroke rate, you don't need to row shorter, because you are changing direction of your body weight every time, like in a stationary area. You can get full compression. And the other thing is, the body develops the way it should develop to make a boat fast. So you row the boat the way the boat needs to go, not the way you are developing in a stationary machine, and then you try to row the boat like the stationary machine and you just move it by fitness. So this is, for me, the question of the advantage. I didn't invent the wheel here. They're pretty obvious, because we all are passionate about rowing and know how a boat should move.
So moving on from that great explanation, if you coach beginners, novices, how should this coach use Row Perfect to accelerate their learning?
So I think the more powerful thing to accelerate a learning process is how you make the person who is going to learn to understand what he needs to do. And the only way you can make somebody to learn faster is by knowing what he should feel when it's done right. So what I will do is, or what I do, because I do it, is you put somebody who's never rowed before in a boat with somebody who's rowed in a double, and you make him feel how he feels when the rower who has been rowing rows, because it's connected with him. So the rower understands, wow, this is amazing. I coach people and I get on the double with them and I start rowing with them, and the first thing they tell me is, wow, this is how it should feel. I never felt that before. So the light that comes into their head, how do I explain how it should feel? Like it's like if I try to explain to you how it feels to pet a horse. Like there is no way you can explain the feel of the hair of a horse, or how it feels, or how I can explain you how a strawberry tastes if you don't try a strawberry. So that's how, when we try to explain the feel of how it feels rowing, is very difficult. So for me, the ways you row with somebody experienced and connected on the boat, they feel. But the Row Perfect has the same possibility with the software and with the information he's getting. They start rowing the machine that is easier than the boat, because as we said, that has no balance, has no direction. You don't need to deal with the weather. There is no dangers. And then you start guiding them of what the numbers need to say and what is a good number. And then when they achieve that, they start feeling something. Or when they get what you want, you ask them, what did you feel? It was different? And they say, yes. Say, well, try to find that feel again. And this is a very powerful way of teaching. So I will say that I try to make the athletes I coach or novices to feel and then practice in this direction, not just row with no direction. Obviously, it's not that simple. There is a lot of skill to develop. You need to change the body. You need to learn a pattern of coordination. You need to develop muscles, posture. You need to develop skill. But if it's guided and in a direction, is a process that is a lot shorter.
tell me, you mentioned you guide them as to what the numbers are they should be aiming for. Which are the numbers that you think are important for beginners?
Beginners and not beginners. I mean, you get athletes that been rowing, you know, for quite a time, and they make big mistakes, or they have a lot of potential still to develop. They just are fast because they have talented engines, physiology. They work really hard, and they work a lot of time, but they still can be a lot faster if they do it better. So what I do, what I ask them is, I make things really simple. The first one I tell them is, I explain them what the power curve is. And the power curve is what the blade, what makes the boat move. So what I tell them is, okay, you are in a boat and the boat is going nowhere because there is no way to move the boat if you don't do something. So we all want to move for the reason I said before, to win races or to glide and have fun and feel rhythm. So if you want to move, what you need to do is you need to put the blade on the water and push the boat. And this sounds like really, we all know that, but just don't tell that to their athletes. They just think that athletes know that, and athletes are just rowing and they don't even know that what the blade is doing or what the purpose of the blade is, and they just take it for granted, and then is where the mistakes start. So I tell them, we're only going to move the boat when the blade is pushing the boat. So I tell them, the power curve is what happens from the moment that the blade connects to the water until the blade gets out of the water, and how you are moving the boat with connected blade. So I tell them, if you want a bigger curve, you need to do two things, because, you know, with a bigger curve, a bigger area, you are moving the boat longer. Obviously, you can stop the boat on the recovery, and you can do, you know, weird things during the blade on the water, like the power curve. But let's get simple. I focus on one is, let's try to keep the blade on the water as long as possible. So let's try to row long, connected to the water with pressure on front. So what I want is a long base. And the second thing I tell them is, let's try to have a constant pressure in front of the blade. So what I want is a curve that grows, is always popping out, and is thick. So I understand that when the curve goes in, or there is a dip in the curve, there is no pressure in front of the blade in that moment, because there is something happened from the moment the blade came into the catch until it went out. So I make them focus on that. I'm not obsessed about the shape of the curve. I'm not obsessed about how funky they look. I teach them connection, pressure, and length of blade work on the water, because I believe that the first step to teach rowing is to teach connection and to teach pressure in front of the blade. And I don't think it's important to teach them to do it right at the beginning. What you need to teach them is be sure they feel how feels connection and leverage. And then when you achieve that, you can get into the details. So I see plenty of rowers that row well the movement, but they shoot the slide, they are disconnected, they are like not moving the boat. And I prefer a lot more to get an athlete that knows how to move the boat and how feels connection and how feels leverage, and then polish it, than a rower that is doing the right movement and is not moving the boat.
That's great, Carlos. And we've had a question from the audience talking about the catch. And you were very emphatic about the catch being the point at which the flywheel starts to move. The question is this: on the Row Perfect, the catch is not as slow as a real catch taken far in front of the rigger in the boat, because in the water there is a pause as you fill the blade. Why is this?
Well, the first thing that I should say is, on the Row Perfect, the heavier the drag, the slower the flywheel is going to go, the easier the catch is going to be. So the same principle of the row perfect applies to the water and from the water to the row perfect. So if you get in a boat and you drop your partner in a double, for example, or you're in the single and you put a bungee cord and you start rowing, you're going to find that when you get to the catch, you have plenty of time to place the blade and feel the load because it's big and the boat is slow. If you're rowing in a quad and it's going really fast, or in an 8, and you put the blade, if you don't pay attention, the blade is gone. So the same thing happens on the row perfect. If you put a very, if you close the gaps, no, you reduce the drag, the K factor, the drag factor, the flywheel is not going to stop on the recovery, and it's going to be really difficult to catch the speed. You need to be a lot more accurate. If you let the wheel slow down, then it's going to be easier. So my answer is obviously the movements in rowing, like the blade gets close to the boat, the water close to the boat, the blade is not directly pushing perpendicular to the boat, is going out, so the water is quiet and is easy, the timing there. But what I'm saying is, what we're trying here to replicate is the time that it takes from you changing directions to find the load on the flywheel and how little you can stop the run of the boat or crush the stern by catching the speed of the wheel. So it's the time of your weight loading in the feet and your hands catching the wheel and suspending your body weight. And that's the timing. That's what you do on the water. It's like if you look at a good rower on the water, you will see that by the time he lands his weight on the feet, he already has his weight suspended to the blade. So you look at the stern, and the stern doesn't go down or almost doesn't go down. If you see a rower that is not as proficient, what you're going to see is by the moment he's catching load on the blade, first, the whole weight of his body has crushed the stern because has landed on the feet. He has not synchronized well the weight landing in the stretcher with the weight loading in the blade. So the same thing happens on the row perfect. The row perfect doesn't crash on the stern because you know there is no that effect. We don't know how much you slow it, but we could see that you are making a dent on the on the power curve, and also you are seeing that you are not being as efficient and as flowing with the machine as you should be. So obviously, the only way to replicate perfect rowing is to row on the water, but the row perfect timing gets very accurate.
That's fabulous. Thank you, Carlos. Moving on to more experienced crews, for the coaches who are working with people who already know how to row and already winning races. How can Row Perfect make them faster?
So we talked about it, but to answer the question direct, I will say I will say if I'm coaching a crew or a person and I'm using the Row Perfect, one of the things I'm going to tell this person, and I know that is true, is I'm going to teach you to make less mistakes than your rivals. And you say, how do you teach that? Well, the accuracy of the software of the Row Perfect is a very sensitive software, and it fluctuates a lot. So I understand that if I can teach an athlete if a race has 250 strokes, to don't make a mistake in any of these 250 strokes on the way it moves its body, on the way it just produces the pressure in front of the blade every stroke, the length of the stroke, the curve, the pressure. I think he cannot know that exactly on the water because you cannot get direct feedback. We can record power curves on the water, but we see them later, so we don't see it at the moment. So what I use the Row Perfect is to develop a perfect rower who doesn't make mistakes. That's one of the ways I use it. It's interesting. I done testing, and I have people training on the Row Perfect, and they see the feedback, and then sometimes I turn the computer away of them and I ask them to row, and then I'm the only one who is looking at the feedback. And they are like on the water. They might have stroke rate, speed, but I don't let them look at the power. I don't let them look at any of the information the Row Perfect is giving that they don't have on the water. Even I make them test like that, and I ask them or do a piece. I say, I want a piece at 20 strokes a minute, and I want you to do the best you can to be regular. And you will be amazed how, you know, like when they don't have the feedback, how less, you know, aware they are of what they are doing. So the people take for granted that their crews on the water are the best they can be, but the power of the direct feedback of how your body is moving is pretty important. So that's one of the ways I do try to make them like less mistakes. And I think any athlete, you know, even if you take the Olympic champion crew who rode the final at the Olympics, who wins, makes mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. No one is perfect. So from there, think about if you have a high school team or a college team or, you know, a novice team, you know, the mistakes increase exponentially. So that's one of the ways. The second way is I develop the body the way it makes the ball go faster. I don't develop muscles that don't make the ball go fast. I develop exactly the body of the ideal rower because it moves like on the water. I do also use the machine to develop strength and a specific power because I believe that because the Row Perfect, you don't turn your body like on sweep rowing, or you don't stop and accelerate your body like in a stationary machine every time, or you don't open your arms at the catch like in sculling. Is a much stronger position to load and to develop on power than rowing on the water with bungee or dropping part of the crew, or rowing on a stationary machine. So I use it to develop a lot of power per stroke in a very healthy and powerful way. I use it to connect crews. So I do a lot of connecting people. So I develop like the feel of the team boat. I change people. For example, if I'm working on a 4, then I'll have them individually. I connect 2. I connect 3 of them. I connect 4. I change the placement. I put them one next to each other, one behind the other, so you can play with a lot of combinations. And then you know, an advantage is that, you know, when there is bad weather on the water, and you know, and you cannot get the training because it's cold or it's raining or it's this wind that, you know, you're not getting that much work done, then you can do a lot of quality work on the land and advance the learning process on the water. So I do believe that, you know, the combination of land training with water training and the equation, you know, well managed, is the one that accelerates or gives more speed over your competition.
You work with the men's team from the University of Washington. What sort of things do you do with them?
Well, we done a lot of things. I mean, they've been working with the Row Perfect for, I believe, 5 years. We've been 5-6 years working with them. We learn a lot of things. We have done a lot of things. We are doing new things all the time. I think they have, you know, every program in the world has a body of water, has, you know, kind of a kind of rower, and, you know, a schedule of schooling and a type of coaching. So what the University of Washington is doing in a really smart way is develop a system that is really good for what they have and is adapted to, and they have tailored it for themselves. So they will do everything I'm talking, but they will fit in the little holes of their things everything they cannot achieve with what they do on the water or with what they do on the land. And they have closed all these little gaps, and they are getting a better system. So they have improved their system by doing better a lot of little things.
That's very interesting, because it's very much the approach that Mr. Woodward, who was the successful English rugby coach that won the Rugby World Cup for England 8 years ago, he then moved to the British Olympic Association, and he advocates that approach for all sports. We've got another question from Chris George, who's in the audience. He says, you advocate joules. How can you set a target for average joules on a 5K test piece? Because he says, we find it easier to use a 500-meter average time and actual time. Can you suggest a joules equivalent? And I know that he's coaching adult men who are beginners.
So this is a good question. So to answer Chris, when I don't give cap rate, so when I don't tell the athlete at the stroke rate I want him to row or her, I use watts or split. So I use joules when we are rowing at a given stroke rate. So if Chris George is doing a 5K text open rate, you know, if the stroke rate goes higher, the joules are going to go down. So I don't think it's good to target a joules, because it might change the way the athlete wants to perform the test. What the athlete needs to find out is at what at the right frequency, that is the stroke rate, with the right drive time, that means the right rigging. So this is like biking. If you tell me, Carlos, I want you to bike from point A to point B, that is 5 kilometers, and it's all out. You're not going to tell me the frequency I need to move my legs, or what rigging I'm putting on my bike. I need to figure out where my torque, my muscles, and my engine work the more efficient. So I think people, when they do a 5K all out on the water, on the rowing machine, they are playing with the stroke rate, the stroke length, and how much they are pushing every stroke. And then they are finding that gives them the better split. So I will say that, obviously, having the joules gives them an awareness. For example, for example, if you are at the end of a race, and you say, okay, we're going down the course at 34, and you tell your crew, I want the last 250 to go to 42, and then they're following the race plan, and they are at 34, and then at the last 250, they raise the stroke rate at 42, but the speed of the boat stays the same, because when they go to 42, they row shorter, and they drop their joules. So really, there is no point to go to 42. So at the end, when you're doing a max piece, what you want to be sure is that the boat has the maximum speed.
So I hope that answers your question, Chris. Carlos, I'd like to ask you about the future. You're clearly a man who's got a very clear future in mind for the sport of rowing. What's your vision for rowing coaches and for the sport overall?
I mean, my vision is that I have clear that people, athletes, rowers, coaches are always going to keep pushing for faster crews, because, as we said, faster crews give a better result, and nature of people is people like to win. People like to just have a gold medal or a better result than they had last year. So people are going to strive for more speed because they want to have a better result, or people want a row faster because it's more fun. Nobody has fun rowing slow, or people are going to strive for rowing better, which is more fun too, because you have more balance. So I do believe that because of that, people are going to keep finding ways to achieve that. I do believe that the biggest opportunity of all is not on making boats with a different design. I think we cannot change the weight, the weight of the boat, and the shape cannot change that much. So I think we're getting to the point where the boat is going to make very little difference, is nothing. I think, and FISA doesn't want to change that because it makes the equipment too expensive. I think the oars, we have got to the point where, you know, the little variations, you know, you get something and you lose another thing. We have played with a lot of things. I think the training programs, I mean, you have people training very different trainings, and they work, they achieve speed, you know, and you say, how these people can go fast doing that? That is the opposite to over there. Well, because it's a good training, there is different paths to get to speed, as different rowing styles. And I don't think there is a better rowing style. I think there is different rowing styles that work. There is different training programs that work. What you need to be is knowing what you do and adapt it to what you have. So for me, my vision is that the biggest room for improvement is going to be on what we do on the land, and how we train that athlete on the land to give them advantages. So I think it goes through the direction of a lot more specific work on the land to make the boat go faster and to make the boat and the athlete be more efficient. So that happens by simulating the movement that you do on the water and develop the body just for what makes the boat go fast. Don't have any extra element that is not making the boat fast. So that's really difficult to prove because, you know, there is so many difference on physiologies and on talented people that you know, is going to take time. But, you know, my vision is that we are going to be a lot more training people on the land the way we know makes the boat go faster.
Now, I should thank you for that and say to the audience that we're ready to take some questions if you'd like to put them into the chat. A reminder that you need to have created an account on Ustream to join the chat. If you're just listening, you can't actually add to the questions there. While those are coming through, Carlos, here's an entertaining question that we got from a subscriber. How can you have more fun in rowing or sculling?
So you can have more fun by doing it better. And if I look at myself and I say, what keeps me going to row, and what keeps me going to just get on the water again or sit on my row perfect machine, I think what makes me have fun is, one is the feel of doing something well that it just gives pleasure. So I will say it's not fun to row poorly and not do it right. It's like what makes a golfer to keep going to the range, I think, is that he sees improvement, and he sees that he's getting better, and he sees that he's enjoying more when he's, you know, practicing. Or what makes a tennis player to keep going practice. So I think for the rowers, it needs to be this moment where if they're losing motivation, they need to look at themselves and say, is what I'm doing the best I can do with my time? It makes sense what I'm doing. It is something that I really want to do with my time, or I just want to burn calories and that's it. You know, I want something out of my training. I want more or not. And I think a lot of people are losing motivation because they get in these circles of just working and numbers, and there is no a direct reaction to gliding and mastering like a perfect movement and awareness of their bodies. Just work and work and work when it should be work done in a way that gives us something. Is not just, you know, like construction work. I don't know if I get clear.
No, that's very clear. And it brings us to another question, which is, if you lose motivation during your training, how can you suggest ways to increase motivation for continuing rowing?
I think the first thing the first thing you need to evaluate is why you have lost motivation. So you need to look into yourself. You know, you might have stress in your life. You might be going through personal problems or work problems, or you know, you don't have the energy to go through the training. So you know, that's not the fault of the sport. It is like, you know, you have a lot of things going on. So then you need to fix those, and then you will find excitement to train again, because you will feel that is important for yourself. If you're losing motivation because you are not getting better, then there you have it. What you need to do is change, and change is hard. Change is a challenge. But you know, if the world was all full of people who never changed, I mean, so we won't be able to be doing that chat today on the internet, because we'll be still like, you know, like not having computers and anything. So there is some people out there who said, you know, I wanna do that different, and I wanna change that. And I think with that we can really do things, you know, in a way that it can help us. So I think people should look at their training, the rowing, and see if it can be done better, or they can do something that motivates them more. Some people need a break. Some people need to take a break from the sport, and they need to find the love for the sport again. And some people maybe need to go to sculling, switch it from sweeping. Some people need to just get away from all these numbers all the time, who are telling them if they're good or not, and they're over analytical. You know, we love numbers as a society, and we love rankings, but you know, at the end of the day, and I said that to a lot of people, what matters is that you get out of the couch, you move your body, and you have fun doing it, because it's good for you, it's good for the people around you, and it just, you know, it just helps, you know, going on the right direction. So it matters if you are like number 1 or number 10. It matters if you're going to win or lose. What matters is that you're doing it, and you are excited, and you're putting energy into do it the best way you can. So I think as long as you get all those things, I mean, if you are trying to win the Olympics, then maybe it's not that simple, because you know, you need to, you are going to a very competitive environment, and your goal is to be number 1 in the world. But if you are rowing because you wanna have fun rowing with your friends, and you wanna feel healthy, then I think the approach should be different, and maybe not all the time as competitive as we've been pushed to.
Thank you. We have a reader question for Ava. Carlos, do you have training advice specifically oriented towards masters scullers who want to be competitive? Ava, you don't say if you are learning to scull as a master, or whether you sculled when you were younger. So master scullers, Carlos.
What is exactly the question for a master scholar?
And do you have training advice specifically for master scullers who want to be competitive?
Yes, a very direct one. My advice is, first, if you're a master scholar, sweep, wherever, you're a master means you're not like a young athlete, or as young as the younger. So the first thing you need to have clear is you don't have a lot of energy to not use properly. So I will say number 1 is you don't have a lot of time. Number 2 is the time you have to train, you don't have a lot of extra energy because you're already busy with a lot of things. And the last one is that the older we get, the less energy we have. So the wiser we need to become how we use it. So what I will have to say is, look at yourself. And first is, tell me if what you're doing every day, because at the end, if you're a competitive master scholar, you're telling me already with that tag that you want to be fast, or you are going to look at yourself and see if you see improvement. So the first question I ask is you to take responsibility of yourself, look into yourself and say, do the way I eat every day is the best way to achieve my goal? Do the way I rest is the best way? Do the way I use my time to train is the best way to achieve my goal? So what I will say is, go to the thing. It's better to row on the water in a single or in an eight or in a quad. Today is better to do, an hour or 10-minute pieces. It's better to, row on a stationary machine or on a dynamic machine. So you need to start asking yourself all these questions and find the system and the things that get you the fastest for the time you have and the energy you put into it. It's like in business. Rowing is business if you want to have a result. So if you do that better, you're going to go faster. It's not rocket science. So there is a lot of people who just do what they tell them to do because they love just doing what they tell them to do because they don't want to take responsibility. But the reality is, if you want to be faster, it's very easy. You just need to do what you're doing better, and there is a lot of room for improvement for everyone, even for, like the people who are at the top.
Thank you. We've got another question from Chris, which is, Carlos, what are 3 key workouts you do on the Row Perfect during the pre-competition phase and in the competition phase?
So that means during the pre-competition phase will be during the regular training. I will do a low rate, a heavy track to slow things down, to develop proper power, to develop the proper posture, strength, coordination, movements that I want on the athlete to replicate on the water. So I slow things down a lot because I know that one of my passions is to see development over time in the athletes I help. So I know that the more I slow things down at the beginning, the more results we'll get over time. I don't like to, in 2 months you're going to achieve that. No, I want in 3 years, in 2 years, in a year, you're going to be rowing totally different. But don't tell me what you'll be doing in a month, because this is a process. Like playing the piano. That means, do you know that anyone in a year can play the piano? And if you need 6 years to play it perfect, it will take you 6 years. You're not going to invent the wheel either. So I will say that a lot of slow rate, a lot of development of the coordination, the proper body, and the efficiency. When we're getting to racing, I will say to Chris, it's pretty obvious. We cannot race at low rate and we cannot race fast because we have a good power curve. We just need to be able to move the ball quickly at high rates because everybody races at high rates and on the water. So what I will do is I will do obviously all the work or a lot on the water. And when I go on the Row Perfect, I'll try to, if I need to say 3 things, is 1, I'll slow down things down because on the water I'm pretty much moving fast so the athlete can feel calm and look at the feedback. 2 is I use it when there is really bad water and I want to keep doing the work that I'm doing and plan on the water. And 3 is I do a lot of the same workout on the water and on the Row Perfect, so people see the difference and become more accurate on the Row Perfect. So I will, for example, one day I say, okay, we have, today we're going to work on 400 or 500 meter pieces at rate pace. Then I'll do them on the water, and the next time I'll do them on the Row Perfect and compare and video them on the water on the Row Perfect and show them they're doing the same mistakes. So I take them away from one place to the other one, and I try to do the workouts the same, so we can compare results and we can compare form and we can try to use one to help the other one.
That's very clear advice. Thanks, Carlos. We're coming up to the end of our hour. And to finish off with, Carlos has very generously put together some special offers for anyone who is interested in buying Row Perfects from him. He's the agent for the USA and Canada. And the offer that he has made is on your screen now. If you want to buy a Row Perfect in Canada or the USA, email rowperfect3@gmail.com, which is Carlos's email address, and he will give you a price quote. And if you mention RowingChat in the email, he will give you 2 Skype sessions with him free of charge. so that you can get advice for your own training, or if you're a coach, for the crews that you're coaching. To mirror this, if you want to buy a Row Perfect 3 in the UK or Ireland, and you go to the rowperfect.co.uk shop, you can use a discount code RowingChat, which is all one word, and that will give you free shipping on your Row Perfects. And if you're in Australia or New Zealand and you want to buy a Row Perfect there, email Becky at rowperfect.co.uk, which is BECKY, and that will give you free shipping for anything you buy for Australia or New Zealand. Carlos, do you have anything else that you would like to add?
No, I think, I would encourage, everyone who has the chance to try a Row Perfect, to row it, and to all the coaches to really try to do a lot of the things that make sense to them and what they are trying to achieve on the water. Try to see how, the Row Perfect can help them to explain things they cannot get on the water, but don't change their coaching way, or don't develop their own way of coaching, which is the more powerful. You don't try to copy somebody, because then it's not yourself. And the Row Perfect is the same thing. Try to understand how I use the machine, or what I do with the machine, and try to use it the way you do. That is the best way, athletes are going to understand you.
Carlos, thank you very much for joining us for Rowing Chat. We are recording the session, and we will make the recording available to everybody who signed up, so that you can share it with your coaching colleagues and your athletes, should they be interested in hearing the very wise words that we've had from Carlos Dinares. Carlos, thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you.